You have to understand that there will be times when you have to sacrifice everything else if you want to get through this course. The biggest challenge for me and anybody who's coming into this country having studied in India, the academic assignments here are very different to how we write assignments in India. You have to show compassion. And all of this cannot be superficial. You have to be absolutely genuine about this. This has to come from inside. If you go and ask a child, if a child has bruise and is coming to school and told their teacher they've been hit by their parents. Now, if you go and ask this child, have you been hit by your parent? They're not going to say no. Parents don't hate you. You stare in their face like a mirror of the reality that they're living in. My fundamental belief is no parent deliberately wants to hurt or harm their children. Sometimes they just don't know how not to do it.
What has been your biggest challenge throughout your career? One thing that every student or professional should know before getting into this career. How do you see AI getting integrated into your job? This was a very, very enriching conversation for me. In part 1 with Kakoli, we explored how Kakoli's journey began in the classroom as a teacher in India. But that was only the beginning. In part 2, today, we step into her transition to social work in the UK, into safeguarding, leadership, and working with some of the most vulnerable children. From classrooms to complex family decisions, this is where her purpose expanded. Let's step into the next chapter of her journey in continuity with our conversation. You have mentioned that you were in the private job, you did not like it, and you finally ended up in the first job and also started training for social service. Can you walk us through the experience of learning in the college that you went to?
So I went to London South Bank, and because I did an employment-based route in social work, I was in the same cohort as people who are doing it full time. But the advantage I had is I could have an extension of 6 months after the 2 years if I needed time to finish up my dissertation. I didn't take the extended year primarily because all my friends were doing their dissertation at the same time. So I wanted to do it with them and finish with them. We kind of kept each other going during that time. So different universities offer social work in different streams. So South Bank offered it as a science. They offered masters in science, MSc in social work. Goldsmiths, which is another really reputed university, they offer it as a master's, MA in social work. So the social work degree is for 2 years. Again, you can go for a graduate degree, that's for 3 years. The course, the master's takes you 2 years, and it has 2 sets of placement of 100 days. One, you have to do it in adult services, and one, you have to do it in children's services. It doesn't matter what kind of adult services you do in it or what kind of children's services you do, because there are like various different areas of children's and adult services you can go into. And once you finish your 2 placements, and there is like 8 modules you have to do in those 2 years. One is research. And in the second year, you also have to do your dissertation. In my time, it was 20,000 words. It's not as long as it used to be that. It's only 10,000 words now, which is much shorter. But you have to do research and your dissertation to get your degree. If you don't do your dissertation, you get your diploma. You don't get your degree. Now, technically, there is nothing stopping you from practicing as a social worker with your diploma. But because the social work degree has been around for quite some time now, because before the degree came around, the diploma was what you did to become, it was called PG Dip, I think it used to be called. So that diploma kind of got you into social work. But because the degree has been around for quite some time, my guess is there will come a time when they will ask for the degree and not so much for the diploma anymore. So if you are thinking about doing social work, I would suggest do your degree. Don't stop at your diploma. So that then I did. So what it entailed for the 2 years, I had to go to university 1 day a week. which was my teaching day, which used to be Monday. And then I was in placement for 4 days a week. And when I wasn't in my 100 days placement, I was in my work 4 days a week. Most other students would have that time for themselves, for studies and for library days. But because I was working, I had to go to work. Yeah, and that was it. That's how did my degree.
So I can see that there was a lot of juggling between three different things. And I'm assuming that there would be a lot of planning at your end to juggle between the three things. So can you just tell us, like, okay, not many will have a job and the degree
Yeah.
together, but if at all, how does the planning and execution look like?
Needless to say, if you're going to say that I'm going to finish at 6 every day, it is not going to work. If you're going to say I'm going to keep up with all my socializing in the weekends, that is also not going to work. That said, are you writing yourself to this course? Are you enslaving yourself to this course for 2 years? No, you're not. But you have to understand that there will be times when you have to sacrifice everything else if you want to get through this course. So every module ends with an assignment. Every assignment has to be 2,000 words. So, say, for example, my first module was on theory, short theories. And in that module, I had to write they'll give you a set question and you had to write an assignment. The biggest challenge for me, and anybody who's coming into this country having studied in India, the academic assignments here are very different to how we write assignments in India. Here, you have to have references and you have to kind of have a reading list and you have to kind of demonstrate that you've read some of those books and you've kind of taken your knowledge from there to answer the question that's being asked of you. And within that write up, you have to kind of also ensure that you are using direct quotes from the books you've read without kind of plagiarizing paragraphs after paragraph. So it is slightly an art form, writing assignments in this country. And I say this in details because I didn't have any experience of it and I had no knowledge of it. So I kind of was taken aback what was required of me. So once you finished your assignment, you'd get your marks. And as you know, you get like a pass, merit, or distinction. And so for two big terms other than your placement. And in two big terms, you had two modules each, so 4 modules and 4 assignments. And then you have to do your portfolio for your placement. So when you are in your placement, you have to do a portfolio that then has like 3 pieces of observation from somebody at work who sees you in action and kind of gives their observation feedback. There's lots of other things you have to do, like reflective studies, and you have to give your reflections on a certain case, what you thought, how you went about it, a learning kind of bit of a thing about what you learned and stuff like that. So that portfolio also kind of takes up a bit of time. And there is not like there's just a pass or a fail on that portfolio. There's no marking on that portfolio. So that's what is needed. And my time, so on the Monday, I used to go to university, and the only thing I didn't let work kind of intrude into my university day because I was in university only for a day, whereas everybody else had the time to go into library and do their studies as I didn't. So all I needed to do on that day was not only attend my lectures, but also make sure I went to the library, got the books that I needed, and I had everything I needed for the rest of the week in case I was doing some written work. So that meant that I finished slightly later on a Monday after the college finished. But what the good thing is, the college finishes at 4. So you have a bit of time in your hand. And then when I was at work, I would often come back in the evening and get out excerpts from my books. Basically, what I did was I got my materials ready. I wouldn't write anything, but I would start putting things in one place. And then when the time came to submit my assignment, I had everything kind of organized. All I needed to then do is pull things and put them in a nice, cohesive way and then submit it. So that's what how I organize myself. And what that meant was sometimes when you are in placement, and this happened to me in my second placement, basically because you're a student, you are sent to the low level, low risk cases, but you never know what you're walking into, right? And once I kind of walked into something in a family and something didn't sit right with me. So I came back and I had to ask for, and those days we had paper files. So I had to ask for the paper files. And there was about 8 files that came from the archives, and they were thick files. And I had to sign them out. And I remember the whole weekend, I just sat at my home went through the files and dug through and deeper and kind of found out what was going on here before I could go back and share my findings. So sometimes weekends would be taken up by those things, because when you are at work, you're writing your case notes, you're writing your assessments, you're doing your supervisions, you're going for your visits, you're doing all of those things about your learning. Where is your time to forensically learn the craft of the job? That time, if you really want to dedicate some time, comes sometimes in the weekends, where you have no phone calls, you have nothing else going on. You can sit, you can have your cup of tea and go through the files and think through what is happening here. Because you really, unlike common perception, there is a lot of thinking that happens in this job. And the ability to assess risks can only come with the knowledge of the family or the knowledge of the case. And that takes time. You have to be really methodical in reading, because you might look at a flight and go, oh my God, I don't want to know. I know what I need to know and I can go from there. But actually, you will do those children a disservice if you don't read the whole thing and the whole story of what has gone on in their families. So that's how I think it was the hardest 2 years of my life. One of my friends tells me that I canceled 9 times on her because we made plans to go out, but I just couldn't. I had to cancel because I was doing something or the other for my course. But we're still friends, so it's all good. Your friends will stay, but it really needs your time, and needs a bit of organization and needs a bit of sacrifice, I think.
What were the subjects that were taught to you in this college, and how did it develop your thinking? You were a teacher before that. You trained to be a teacher, and now you were in a different field altogether, which needs a lot of empathy, and you need a lot of different kind of mental skill set to deal with the cases that come to you. So, what did this college teach you besides the subjects? Also, talk about the subjects to handle a case.
I think, just to be clear, I don't think I learned anything about the practice on the ground from my university that much. I learned it from my placements. So that is my place where I learned most of it from. Within my university, the subjects I did was social work theory. That was one of my subjects. Child development was another subject. And interestingly, child development is taught in a very different way. So within the child development, you need to do 6 hours of observation of a child, not a child known to any service, just a child in a nursery or in a childminder setting. So I had gone to a local nursery in Westminster where I worked, and I had to kind of give letters and then ask the teachers to send them to the parents and see if one parent gives consent for me to go and observe this child. When I was writing my observations, I was like, what am I writing? What does this even mean? She ran to the form teacher and she cuddled and she gave them a hug. She snatched from I was like, I didn't understand much about it then. But when I linked back to the theory of child development, it became really clear how children show different things at different stages of development, and what a child who doesn't come from an adverse background, and the idea for you to go to that observation was for you to see what comparatively, and compare it with what you might see if you went and saw a child who was in an adverse situation, how they might interact very differently to a child who is in a healthy surrounding and has a healthy upbringing. So that was the second module. Then came the placement, 100 days. My first placement was with adults. And then you go back to uni again. And then comes law. And I think the other thing that they teach in the first year, I would like to say policy, but I think policy came in the second year. Legislation was legal aspects was the one thing. Oh, and anti-discrimination and anti-oppression. So that was another kind of area. So anti-oppression and anti-discriminatory practice ran like throughout the course, but they also had like a separate kind of a dedicated space for it. And in all these kind of, after this, the lessons, so for example, I used to have my morning university lesson on theory, and then in the afternoon, I'd have a lesson on child development. And both these lessons were followed by a 45-minute seminar where you were given scenarios and you were put in small groups where you had to kind of come up with how you're going to manage this scenario in discussion with your peers. So that's how the university kind of runs. And in the second year, when you do your research, so research is a module, one of the modules you do. Policy is another module you do, and you do your dissertation, and you do your 100 days placement. Now, with the dissertation comes a little bit more work because you have to submit your ethics clearance and all of that. And you also have to come up with what you are doing your dissertation on, which has to have some link to social work. Like, of course, you can't go and do a dissertation on dinosaurs. It's not, it's not appropriate at all. Um, I there were lots of things, so you can do it as a quantitative, you can do it as a qualitative, and then and that's it. So that is your course, the whole of the course. I think within that, I think the thing that I found most difficult was the research one, primarily because there isn't much research at least when I was studying, in the field of social work in the UK. So a lot of research in the US, a lot of research in Israel, and in a lot of other countries, but not so much in the UK. So it was really, really quite difficult to write that assignment to make it more, how should I say, appropriate for this country. It was the most toughest I did. Yeah. And that is it. Modules are not that difficult. They're quite easy. They're quite interesting if you have interest in the subject. And there's hosts of writing on it. And as a social worker, you are told from day one to write without jargons in a simple language that children can understand. So if you kind of take up that, then it is just an easy thing to do.
Okay. To be very, very honest, I find all the subjects quite interesting, listening to it. I don't know how like you said, it was very interesting to you while reading it as well. I don't know how I will find it when I'm put to that situation. But by the sound of it, it seems very, very interesting and very different from what we generally hear in the different fields that I have spoken to or I have known offline as well. So it seems a very interesting course. But were there any situation at any point you thought, oh, what I've gotten into, should I continue? Should I go back? Was there any, doubts in your head ever during this?
No, there were no doubts in my head. I think I knew I wanted to do this course. I think there were times when I felt maybe I wasn't confident enough, or I didn't have the skill enough. And that would generally come when I was practicing as a student. If there was say, an experienced pediatrician or a doctor, and they kind of put you in their place, you kind of really thought, my God, what am I doing? I have no idea what I'm doing. But there was a few kind of scenarios where, I had given my hypothesis about something in a meeting and I was shut down by much more experienced professionals. And I kind of felt like my voice wasn't heard because I wasn't the most experienced social worker in that meeting. So those made me upset, and those made me a little bit like maybe a little bit stamped on in time at times, not being able to kind of share your professional judgment on something. But that experience also is something that every social worker should have. I'm telling you, the reason behind it is because then you know how the children feel when they are not heard and when they are listened to. You can really, really relate to that feeling. And that really makes you advocate for them really hard.
And at this point, I would really want you to think, not as Kakoli at this age, but Kakoli doing the course of social service. What are the core strengths, the soft skills that are required, not to do the course, but to be at a job of a social service? What are those core skills and what not to have? People who has those set of skills should be in social service. And for example, just to help you, I think non-empaths, and this is my personal opinion, non-empaths should not be doctors. I have that very strong feeling in my head, having my experience with doctors for a large part of my life. I think non-empaths shouldn't be doctors. But what do you think are the skills of people who should be in social service and shouldn't be in social service?
Okay, so there's two sides to this. One is your overt skills that you need day to day to do the job, and one is your inward skills like covert skills that you need to be able to do this job. Now, what do I mean by that? And actually, by covert skills, what I mean is if you are a person who has a point of view and then are not able to um, take on other perspectives and modify your view, then this is probably not your job. Because you might go into a home and you might look at a family circumstance and you might have a particular idea in your head. But unless you have the ability to remain neutral and test that out, your hypothesis out, you cannot do so. You will be doing disservice to the children. um, your thinking around empathy. Yes, absolutely. You cannot do this job if you do not have empathy for everyone, just not children, for everyone. You need to have even empathy for your professionals, fellow professionals. You have to be sensitive. You have to be culturally competent, primarily because we live in a country that is multicultural and people are immigrants and people come with their own experiences. So they bring a lot from their countries of origin that shapes them, and that is how they know how to do things. So, for example, I do a lot of things as a parent that I have seen my mother do for me, and you cannot deny that that is what shapes you, right? So, but as a social worker, you have to be culturally competent to understand. You don't have to agree to anything. That is another skill you need, because your primary intention in this job is to help children, right? So you don't have to agree to help children. You can disagree, but you have to be a negotiator. You have to be an influencer. So you have to influence the family and you have to negotiate with the family in thinking about what is safe for the children. And how do you do that? You do that in a respectful, in a humble, kind way. You have to show compassion. And all of this cannot be superficial. You have to be absolutely genuine about this. This has to come from inside. If you're not genuine, they will know that you're not being genuine. So you have to be really, really, you have to be absolutely authentic about your feelings about a particular thing. The other thing I would say I walked into a home and a baby's crying and they haven't been changed for 2 days because the mother has been busy getting um, high on drugs. I can, I personally probably am going to be slightly judgmental about the parent, right? Because I'm a parent. So there's no way I can completely shut my identity of a parent and look at this neutrally. That's not going to happen. But what I can do is I can think about what does this baby need from me now? And what does this baby need from me? The baby needs their mother. And how do I then help this mother to be available for their baby? Sometimes you can make it work, sometimes you can't make it work. That's okay. But if you let your own personal feelings overtake what you're seeing and how you're going to respond to it, then you will be doing a disservice to the babies and the children that you're working for. Children will tell you they don't want to talk to you, and they will be a stonewall. Because if you go and ask a child, if a child has bruise and is come into school and told their teacher they've been hit by their parents, now if you go and ask this child, have you been hit by your parent? They're not going to say no. Yes, of course I've been hit by. They are going to say no, or they're not going to talk to you. But as a social worker, you will have to think about, my job now is not to find out and investigate and then hold somebody responsible in this. My job now is to align myself with this child so that he can or she can share what is going on in their that at home that is causing them harm, so that I can act on it. So that is what I would say. Is you have to understand what is going on for you to be able to help others. In social work, it is more needed than anywhere else.
I can get that. It is very important for you to separate your personal judgment and personal liking and disliking, but act in the situation and see the person who needs you the most at that time, be their support at that time than anything
Absolutely.
else. Okay, that's very briefly put. I'm sure it is very difficult. I mean, I'm just summarizing it, but when you're walking that path, I'm sure it's a very difficult thing to do. You must have learned it over the years to do. But as a starter in the social service, how did you, when you were in your 100 days placement, how did you imbibe these skills? How were you taught if you did something not right? How were you taught to be, handle something in a different way than you were handling? What were your experiences?
So I think as a social worker, you need to have curiosity. You have to be curious about everything. So I think I'm a very nosy person. I'm very curious about everything. So when I go into a house, I am curious about where the child sleeps, what the child eats, what the mother cooks, where does she do her shopping from. So I'm really curious. I want to know everything. And I think that is probably what initially helped me build my relationships with parents. And the other thing I did, and this was what I was taught. I was taught by one of my people who I observed when we went out, and then they came to observe me. I was seeing this kind of child who was she was 13, 14, and she just doesn't listen to her father. And there was a bit of their relationship was really in a rocky place, and she wasn't going to school, and things were not great in this house. And when I went to this visit, I was beside myself. I just didn't know how to kind of get this child to talk to me and help this dad manage this child at home. Because she was like, I don't need a social worker, just go. I don't need to talk to you. She's 14. She'll just shut the door on your face. So I was a bit like kind of taken aback. I didn't know how to progress that conversation. So one of my mentors kind of said to me, look, the best thing you can do is go and be honest and transparent. And how do you do that? Is you put down a consequence matrix. So everything in social work escalates. So you have early help teams, then you have child in need, then you have child protection, and then you have care proceedings or court, and then you have children in care. So she said to me, go into this home and tell them in clear terms about where this is going, where this will end if nothing changes. And that is when their ability to see what you are seeing is going to help them think about how they do things differently. So I remember I went in and I had this piece of paper. I sat down with dad and this child, and I kind of drew some lines, and I said, look, this is where we'll end up. You will end up being in a foster placement somewhere with a person you don't know, in a place where you don't have your belongings. You're not with your dad. That's not where we want to be. We want to be at home with dad. We need to do something to be here. And then we kind of talked about how we would behave in the week as parents, as you know, the reward chart and stuff. But we got there, and this 14-year-old had never had a reward chart in her life. So this was a novel concept for her. It's not going to work for every 14-year-old, but it worked for her. So the other thing is knowing is each child responds differently. What works for one child will not work for the other child. Does that mean that I have to find different tools in my toolkit all the time? No, not all toolkits. Some you have to just modify to use. Because on the whole, the trajectories, after a point in your career, you can see the trajectories where this is going to end. So you can predict somewhat. How you're going to end there is going to be different for each child. So the path you will traverse is going to be different. So that is another thing to think about. How you respond to one, you do not respond to the other. And take time to build relationships. That's really key. The other thing to remember is this is what lots of people say, and I learned in my work, is parents don't hate you. Parents don't, you stare in their face like a mirror of the reality that they're living in. And that is what they find hard. It's the guilt and the shame and knowing that they're not doing the best that they could do as a parent probably kind of rips them inside. No parent, my fundamental belief is no parent deliberately wants to hurt or harm their children. Sometimes they just don't know how not to do it. And they hurt you because you show them that mirror, that you are not being a good parent. Nobody can kind of, knowing that you've somehow harmed your child can be such an awful feeling. It's like death in itself. You've let down your child. Where do you go with that? So I think that's where parents end up being hostile, aggressive towards you, call you names or swear at you. But if you bear in mind that they're not doing it to you as a person, they're doing it to what they see about themselves, then I think this is a job where if you get to the other side, it's very, very rewarding.
I get that. Now I'll take you to the point, like you have done your college studies and you finished your course. You went back to the same company that you were working in at that time, or did you switch very soon?
No, I went back to Westminster, but because I was qualified then and they did not have a position in either of the services, they said to me that you could look for a qualified position anywhere else. So I then ended up for a very short time in Kensington and Chelsea in their children's team, where I moved back to Westminster again.
Okay. So it's considered, I mean, in my head and with my very little knowledge on social service, I have mostly heard it as an NGO service in India. Okay. I don't know how they make money, but well, when we are in UK and you are with Kensington, you started with Kensington. How is the money aspect as a profession? Just as a professional, I want to understand if someone wants to be here, how does it cater to your practical needs?
So social work salaries have come a long way. So when you start as a social worker, some in the London boroughs offer you anywhere between 40 to 45K a year as a starting point of your career. When I started, it was 32. So you can understand how much it has changed. There is a difference though. London has London weightage. So we get slightly more money than the rest of the country. It is not a hugely financially lucrative profession, especially in the initial years. So as a social worker and as a senior, when you go to management, you probably do kind of get to a place where you get more money. But it is, and also it's not a 9 to 5 profession as well. So if it doesn't balance in any way in either side. That said, what you do have and what you do get is if you're doing, so you can do social work in two different ways in this country. You can do statutory social work, which is what I do. So I work for a local authority. I work for the statutory services. Or you can do for the third sector, which is not a statutory social work. So the difference is the local authorities, it is incumbent on them to safeguard children. For NSPCC, they have a duty to safeguard children, but it's not incumbent on them. So you can go and work in the third sector as well. So you can work for NSPCC, you can work for Barnardo's, you can work for children's rights, you can work for different organizations as well. I guess what I'm trying to say is financially, probably, if you're looking at this job solely from a financial perspective, then maybe this is not a job that you want to do because it doesn't pay that great. It pays okay. It pays reasonably well, but it doesn't pay that great. But if you're looking at this job, financial remuneration plus self-satisfaction and reward, then definitely this is
exactly. This is what I wanted to get to, because people who are considering this career, this profession, they should know both aspects. It's just not the financial satisfaction or the satisfaction of the job that matters. It's a combination of both. And if you're okay with that, take a plan, experience it. So yes, thank you for openly sharing about it. Well, so once you are in the initial years, like, your first 3-4 years, I just want to understand the first 3-4 years of your life in this job. How does your week look like? Like, generally I ask, how does your day look like? But in your case, I will ask, how does your week look like from Monday to Sunday? Work-life balance being the core to it. How do you manage your family? How do you manage your job? How do you manage your emotions? And that's the third part of the question, because it's not an easy job emotionally as well.
No. And did you mean the initial years of my career?
Initial years, and then we'll come to this also, the current as well.
So I guess I was somewhat lucky, in the initial years. My husband used to travel all the time. Before COVID, everyone used to travel. So he used to go on a Monday and he used to come back on a Thursday. So basically, I used to be a workaholic for the first 4 days of the week. No, I'm joking. So I worked in duty and assessment. So that was the first response. If you want to call it the first response team, it is the first response team. All the new referrals come into that team. They are not known to the service. So this is the new work that the local authority is getting. We'd be on duty 1 week, and then we'd not be on duty for 2 weeks, and then we'd come back to duty on the fourth week, I think. When you're on duty, what it meant was any new referrals that came in that week, you had to respond to it. So it was a busier week. So say, for example, a referral comes into their service from a school, say around 2:00. It's about child abuse. Then you have to have a meeting with the police, the child abuse investigation team. So that's the part of the Met Police that deals with children safeguarding. you have to have what is called a strategy meeting. It is absolutely necessary when you have a referral for safeguarding concerns, where there's child abuse concerns. You have to have a meeting with, it's a multi-agency meeting. So you have to have a meeting with the police, but police is a key professional that has to be in that meeting. And then the health professionals and the education professionals also come, dependent on whether the child is in school or not. So the reason why police attend this meeting is child abuse is a crime against children in this country, which they can prosecute parents for. So that, why is that meeting important? That meeting is important because that helps the police and you as social workers to decide whether or not there is a threshold for a joint investigation with the police, or whether or not it's a single agency investigation by the social workers, which is probably, I would say, 85% of the cases are single agency social work investigations. So then this is at, say, this finishes at 3:30, quarter to 4, your meeting's done, you know what you're doing. Say you're doing a joint visit with the police. Let's talk about the most extreme one. Then you go out on your visit to the school. The child is kept back in school. So you go to the school, you meet the child with the police, you do the interviews. The parents probably come, they're probably waiting. By the time this interview finishes, you've kind of made some sense of whether or not it is safe for the child to go home. You're already hitting like 5:36. If the child can go home, great. Things kind of fine. You will probably also are making your way home. But if the child can't go home, then you have to look for a placement for this child. And because you've responded to it as a day service, emergency duty team doesn't take it up. It is your responsibility till you finish that. So you then get hold of your emergency duty team, ask them to give you placements. You then take this child to the placement. Sometimes you will leave the child in the school with the police officers, or the police officers might go to the home with the parents to pack a bag for the child. And then you take the child to the placement. That is a fundamental duty of a social worker. If you're removing a child and placing them somewhere else, you take them with you. You do not leave them to anybody else. So you will take them to the placement. You will have like some placement agreement with the foster carer. You know, what time is school? Is she going to drop him to school? Is she going to pick him up? Does he have an after school club? So you're going to have to give all this information. So with the travel time and all of that, by the time you finish, it's probably 9:30, 10th, and then you kind of come back home. And then the question is, can you have a late start the next morning? It all depends. Because if the police have decided that they are going to interview the child in their custody suite to prosecute the parents, they would probably have set it up at 9 o'clock in the morning, which means you have to be in the placement to pick this child up and take them to the custody suite for an interview. Not custody suite, sorry, interview suite for an interview. So that duty week is busy. No, not always. Okay. Not always are these cases coming in, and not always are you going to be having all of these things. Some days you will finish at 5. Some days you will be at home on time. Some days of duty, this is the reality of when you're at work. The other 2 weeks of your work is primarily you visiting families, you're making your findings, you're writing your assessments, you're doing your meetings and all of that. Now, because you would want to, the reason why social workers complain about long hours is there is no way you can meet a child who's at school before they come back from school, right? So the children come back from school in this country. Every state school finishes from 3:15, 3:30. They're at home by around 4:15. You have to give them some time to kind of come back from, have a snack, change their clothes, have a bit of downtown before you go and see them. So you're not probably going to their home to see them till 4:30, 5 o'clock. And therein, your day becomes long. It's not like we are complaining of longer hours. It is essentially long hours, primarily because school going, there's no other way of seeing school going children. And lots of children will tell social workers, please don't come and see us at school. I do not want my friends to know that I have a social worker. And if you want to respect that child's wishes, then there is no other way to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. What I can see is you're interacting with a lot of people in your job, like police officers, like, even the borough, you interact with MLAs, if I'm assuming right. You interact with a lot of people with a lot of authorities, very legal authorities. How do you learn to interact with them? Because those are not the people whom we interact, us as holders of different jobs. We don't interact with them on a daily basis. How do you learn to pave your way? Well, they are also humans, I get that. But then they come with a lot of, authority in their hands. How do you deal with them? I mean, that's my curious question that I have.
I think, you know, you slowly build relationships with them. So in my 16 years, the police officers I've worked with, I know them by their first names. They will call me up and say, long time no see, what's going on? So I've kind of really got there. Again, I think it's your same skills that you use for your families, you use for your professional colleagues. Treat them with respect, be kind to them. If they have a difference of opinion, rather than kind of going into it head to head, try and understand from where they're coming. Is there a possibility for you to remain flexible? And taking a one down position, I believe in one down positions. So I have been in meetings where I have heard people make valid points, but I have known that this is not going to work for the child I'm working with. So what I've had to do is say, I hear you. I think you're making a valid point. But my concern is A, B, and C. Then give the evidence, because sometimes what people do is, it is not going to work. No, you have to give the evidence. Why doesn't it work? So actually, that being respectful and being kind of outwardly showing you trust them and you value them and you are taking their perspective seriously can really help you navigate those relationships. I think you want to be able to be respected by them like you respect them, and you can use certain skills to get there. And knowing your job is really, so I think what really helps me is knowing my children and knowing my families really, really well. So I will never go into a meeting without reading stuff. I will skim. Of course, now in my career, I know what to look for and where to look for it, right? But I will skim and I will know the things I need to know, and I'll go into a meeting. And the other thing I will say is, if you don't think your plan is making sense, but somebody else's is, so if the police is making a better plan than you, have the ability to say, yeah, I think you are way better than I am. So I'll follow what you're saying. I think that also helps. I think sometimes people's own kind of egos and own kind of, am I going to be seen as somebody who's incompetent? Those kind of feelings come in. And actually, if you leave those aside, nobody's judging you. Nobody's looking at you and saying you're not a good worker. And even if they are, they know nothing about you to say that. You and your supervisor know whether or not you're a good worker or a bad worker. So, but in that interaction, try and see how I can bring someone along with me in this work that I'm doing. And can I join them? If I can't work with them, if they are not going to come with me, can I join them at least halfway? Can I meet them halfway? And then I will bring them halfway to myself.
So, in your initial years, well, we'll talk about the emotion bit a little later. But in your initial years, what was the biggest challenge you faced? Initial 5 years?
I think time scales.
Sorry,
I think each statutory work has time scales. So every assessment has to be written within a certain time scale. And I found that doing visits, doing the duty work, doing the Section 47 investigations, finding enough time to write my assessments timely really was the most challenging bit. And also because you don't want to rush these documents, because so these documents are kept in records for 80 years of a child's life. So they don't go away. So you don't want to write it in a way that way if the child wants to come back and read it and sees it and thinks, oh my God, who is this social worker? Has completely crucified me in this document. So you want to be thoughtful in it. So I think that's the bit I found really difficult, is keeping in time scales and making sure I submitted my documents and reports in time. Because one of the things that happens with that is there is Ofsted and DFE kind of not marks you, but that is your key performance indicator, is your time scale. So if you can't keep to your time scales, then you're not doing a great job, actually.
And Ofsted and DSE are, if you can
So
explain.
Department for Education and Ofsted are your kind of people who oversee your service.
Thank you. So let's come to your career progression. So you started as a social worker at the position that you started, and now you are heading your social service in the boroughs. The boroughs being Kensington and, can you just name the other borough?
Kensington, Chelsea, and Westminster.
And Westminster. So you are doing a fabulous job, as I have seen a little bit of your career profile. Can you walk us through how it all went and to where you're sitting right now, how it all transcended to where you're sitting right now?
Lakshmi, when I first started as a social worker, I had a 10-year plan. And my 10-year plan was to become a service manager at the end of 10 years of my career in social work. And I gave my time. I did not rush it. So when I was a senior practitioner in the locality team, so I in the long-term social work team, so I did a lot of court work. And I absolutely loved court work. I think court work is not because you removed children and because you kind of had alternative plans for them, but because that intervention, you have to be so thoughtful in that intervention. Because if you're removing a child from their parent, you have to have a better alternative. And kind of that kind of demand of you is so humbling at times that you have to be really kind of completely give yourself into it. And I liked that. And because and as I was saying, time scales was my biggest bugbear. In courts, the court sets time scales, so gives you your time scales, and so you just have to work to those time scales, and you get there at the end. So it was much easier. When I was doing the frontline job in the long-term team, I was enjoying is probably the wrong word, because a lot of parents might turn around and say, how can you enjoy a job when you are dealing with such atrocities and adversities in family lives? When I say enjoying, what I mean is I was getting a lot of satisfaction from the work. I wasn't thinking about a supervisor or a manager's role. It was actually my supervisor at the time. She turned around and she said, actually, there'll come a time you will probably be supervised by somebody who's less experienced than you, and that will frustrate you. So you really need to think about, taking the next leap. And that's how I became a team manager, a deputy service manager. Then I stayed there for about 5 years in that role, really enjoyed it. And then again, my supervisor who was leaving kind of really pushed me into thinking about a service manager's position. And I ended up being a service manager. In all this time, I think one thing that was, and my staff will tell you this, is one thing that they find, and I know that I don't forget children. If you come and talk to me about a child, I will remember their name. I will remember the circumstances. Nobody has to come and tell me the story again. I don't believe in that. I have to remember them. And after I became a service manager, I then decided that I was going to move back to the front door team, which is where I started my journey, if you remember. And the reason for that was around 2014, 2015, there was a huge shift in social work. And social work kind of they were looking into ways of practicing with the ideas and concepts of family therapy. So systemic family therapy became a huge influence on social work. And systemic social work was taking root everywhere. And Westminster also was embedding systemic social work practice. And then when the systemic social work came, every other team had kind of started practicing in systemic social work way, except the front door assessment team. The thing was that there is no time for doing aesthetics in the front door. One of the core aspects of systemic social work is, how do you do it? It's about thinking about being thoughtful, sensitive, kind, compassionate. That's how you do it. And the pushback from the assessment team was, no, this is too fast paced. We can't do all of that. We just have to kind of get on with it. So my intention was to go back to the front door team and embed systemic social work practice in that. I had that vision. It was hard work initially, but we got there in the end. It became a systemic practice. We got really good feedback from Ofsted about our systemic assessments and all of that. So it wasn't a new thing, but I kind of made sure that social work, so all assessments in the assessment team during my tenure there used to be written as letters to the children. So all the assessments were written. So, dear so-and-so, we came and saw you. We saw your parents. We saw your siblings. This is what we did. You did this with me. I did this with you. Your parents told me about. So it's kind of written as a letter to the child. Friendliest language and the most easiest language. So anytime this child comes and wants to see their assessments, they will see that a social worker really cared, really thought about them when they came and saw their family in crisis. But I had been doing assessments service manager for the last 5 years. I'd seen them through COVID. I'd been there for quite some time, and it was becoming less and less challenging to run that service. Everybody was doing such a great job. I was like, it's becoming a bit samey. I need to do something different. And then I started thinking of kind of looking for senior roles, and I started looking for heads of service roles. I went for quite a few interviews actually, and I wasn't successful. And this role wasn't something that I had wanted to do because children with disabilities is slightly niche area of service. And I don't know. It was my there's a story behind it, and I'd like to share it with you. So basically, when my daughter was about 2 years old, we'd gone to Westfield, and we were in the food court. I was feeding her, and I was eating something. And just next to me, there was a mother, and there was a child who had cerebral palsy and was in his wheelchair. He was about 9, 10 years old, and this mother was feeding this child, and the food was dribbling from his mouth. And every time she put a spoon in, it dribbled. She'd take a hanky and she would wipe it very gently every time. And I just looked at her and I thought, my God, your patience. I do not have this patience. I am so lucky that my child doesn't need that kind of attention from me. And your child is so privileged to have you as a parent who is so unconditional and so like gives everything to this child. You've got not even got a frown in your face. You're not even lifting the spoon in a bit of a hurry. You just going in the steady pace that your son needs from you. And I was telling the story to somebody, and I was saying, and that's the reason I don't want to go to children with disabilities. I don't think I'll be good. But my friend just turned around and said, that probably is the reason why you need to go to children with disabilities, and you'll be great because you can see what others can't see, the challenges these parents face day in, day out. And it made me think differently. And yeah, and that's how I ended up interviewing for the role and ended up on the role. And it's been what? And so just to say, this is the only bi-borough service in the whole of the 2 boroughs. And it came up. So when I took over, it was after a period of a year and a half's transformation and restructuring. So I've taken them over at a very flux time. So they are all a little bit all over the place a bit.
Okay. Okay, so it actually gave me goosebumps when you were narrating that story about the child there and how patient the parents are, the mother is. Now we'll come to that emotional side of, your job. How do you ground yourself after a difficult day at work? What is your coping mechanism there?
I've never gone back home and taken children thoughts with me. I'll tell you why. I have never gone back home till I am sure that everything is safe in my caseload. So that probably is why I have been able to really boundary my home from my work. I absolutely will not go home if I know that something is going on in a family home that I'm working with, and I am not sure whether that child is safe enough. I will do everything I need to do before I can go home. So first things first. So there's a real boundary between my home and my work. I work from the office all the time. I rarely work from home. And the reason I don't do this is some of the things I am exposed to on a day-to-day basis, some of the circumstances and the situations and what the children experience. I do not want to even talk about them in my home because then there is no other place for me to hide. It will then infiltrate my home, right? Those thoughts will be there. They will linger in the air. And I don't mean that in a energy kind of a way. I just mean me as a person will have those thoughts in that home. And actually then me having Kakoli at home and Kakoli at work completely defeats the purpose. When I work from home, I tend to do very strategic kind of meetings that doesn't need much thinking. And if I have a day of back-to-back meetings, I'll do them. Even during COVID, I went to work every day and I worked from the office. Emotional resilience, or, how do I deal with when I walk in and see some of the things I've seen in my life? I don't know. All I can say is every time I've seen something that has shocked me, I have always thought about the child. And I've said to myself, if I am feeling this way, how is that child feeling? And actually, therein probably comes in the parent in me, and that takes over probably. As a parent, you will understand that we everything we do, even the small things, kind of revolves around your child. And Your child, you go to the supermarket, the things you're picking up are the things that your child likes to eat. You're going to a shop, you're picking, you've seen your child doesn't need a pajama, but it's a pajama that she'd like. So you pick that up because you know that they like that, right? That's how you lead your life. And probably because I did not become a mother for till quite late in my life, probably all those years when I wasn't very young, I could have been, I could have had a child by then, but I spent my time doing social work. So all those children were like, how are they feeling? What are they going through? And you need friends, not with whom you can share what is going on in your work, but you need friends whom you can go and say, I've had a really rough day. And they say to you, what do you need from me? Do you need to go out for a drink? Do you need a cup of coffee? Do I need to come over and sit with you for 10 minutes? What is it you need from me? And you need a supportive partner who doesn't have to say anything, but just hold your hand for a few minutes and tell you how you are doing, make you a cup of tea. That's all you need. And you need colleagues who understand how it is for you because they go through that the same day, helps you to talk it through, gives you time. There's a lot of kindness that happens around you when you are a social worker, and a lot of kindness you received. And because you receive that kindness, that helps you to deal with some of the emotions and some of the sadness that kind of descends on you on a regular basis. The worst is, I think, child death. And it happens. And we have it in you occasionally come across those incidents. And it is a sad time. But also, this is also a profession. There has to be, much as I am sad and upset, I have to know where I can park them, how I can deal with those things. But that comes with experience. That doesn't come in the beginning. And again, to tell you a small story, when I first began as a social worker, I was working with this mother, and she was a victim of domestic abuse. And she'd often and she had a little small baby, and she'd often come to my house with in the office with bruises. And I was helping her to move housing wise. And the father of the baby would come to the office, and he was in my face. He'd bang the table. He was really hostile and he was really aggressive. And I used to always think, oh my God, he's making me feel so scared. Is he going to punch me? Am I going to get kicked here? What's going to happen here? But he kept telling me, this mother drinks. He said, you cannot leave my child with her because she drinks. She drinks. And I didn't listen. I was like, he's being malicious. He doesn't mean he's doing it to spite this, to spite, out of spite, and he doesn't mean any of this. So I moved her. And 2 months later, the health visitor in the new borough called me and said, did you know this mother had a drink problem? So the local authorities removed the child. And actually, the penny just dropped. And it was like, I let my feelings of how he was making me feel cloud my judgment on something that he was telling me could have been harmful for this child. I did not listen to him. And that was really a pivotal experience in my life, because I then learned not to go into these meetings on my own. I'd always take a colleague when I knew that things were going to get hairy. I always learned to come up and get a debrief. So all of those things started happening more and more. That's how you manage your emotion. You get your debriefs, you call your colleagues, you go out with your friends, you do your happy things, you take your time off. Yeah. Never change your holidays. Go on holidays, take your time off. Kind of create boundaries between your professional life and your personal life. In a way that you're not letting your job, you're not making your cup of tea in your kitchen and then you're thinking about this child. Don't do that, because if you do that, that will burn you out. Yeah. And that will get you down. So it's an acquired skill. It's an acquired skill over the years that you learned to separate your work to your home life. How was your work-life balance? Like, as a mother, as a wife, how did you balance it out? So you are doing justice to everything? I think I'm not doing justice to any. No, so I think, as I said, since COVID happened, my husband works from home all the time. And so, drop-offs and pickups are no longer an issue. I don't have to do them. I remember when my daughter started in school, she has such great separation anxiety. The first 6 weeks of her crying every day and me having to carry her through and take her to the nursery, it was such a chore. And then being late at work and then leaving work early to come and pick her up, it kind of felt like I never had enough hours in the day to do my job properly. But now, because picking up and dropping off is no longer an issue, I think I do have that kind of ability to, if I need to get a bit delayed at work, I know that nobody's going to be standing in the street for me. I know things are okay. Um, I take my time in the morning, so I don't go into work early. So I will get my daughter ready. She's out of the home going to school, and then I get ready. That is my time with my daughter. That's my quality time in the morning every day with my daughter. I will do whatever, but get her ready before I go into work. Very occasionally, if I've had to go for really urgent meetings at say 9 o'clock, then it's a bit different. But they are very rare. They don't happen much. And then Saturdays and Sundays are my family time. I do one activity with my daughter, so I'll take her to one activity and bring her back. And we will probably get some breakfast on the way or do something together to kind of spend some time together. So, and my husband and me, we probably spend either Friday and Saturday watching something on Netflix together or getting a takeaway. And we try to make most of our time when my daughter goes on trips or to birthday parties so that we can go and have some quiet dates together. But that's how I kind of make time for everybody. It is a juggling act.
It is a juggling act. That is how it is in most of the professions. I was just trying to understand your perspective on it, because you are in a profession which does not have a time boundary, right? Yeah, you have to work at erratic times. Yeah, and everyone in the family does understand when you have such a responsible job.
Yeah.
Where another child's life or emotional stability depends on you doing your job right.
Yeah.
Is so important to understand how you do it.
It's very funny. It was a point when I was in my previous team, in the assessment team, and I had like about 182 kids open in the service at any given point. And my daughter once asked me, how many children do you have in your service? And I said, about 182, I think. And then I heard her saying to one of my friends, my mom has 182 plus one child. She's a very busy lady.
I'm sure you are. You have a handful. Not a handful, sorry. More than a handful.
So she always comes those. I think one of the things that, I know that most parents probably do it as well, but because I work in this field, I have tried to cultivate compassion in my daughter from a very young age. And I've been honest with her, and I've said to her, there are children who need us a lot more than you at times. You would be looked after by somebody really who loves you. So your dad or your grandmother or somebody will look after you. But some children don't have anybody other than your mother to go and look after them. So we just have to manage this and juggle this. So she tried to kind of give her that idea that, I guess it was also about putting some compassion in her about thinking about others.
Okay, fine. Kakoli, I would like to ask you, what other areas of social work are there that people can think about, pursuing, other than children's social work or, anything related to children or adults? What are the other areas?
So I think, so within that, you could go into policies. So there are lots of civil servants who write the policies. You could do work for national policy writing agencies. You could go into law. So you could do family law, and you could train as a barrister or a solicitor if you wanted to do family law. A lot of my social work friends and colleagues have done that. They've gone and you could become a child psychologist or a child's counselor. So you could go in that route where after doing social work, you could train with CAMS or you could train with mental health to get that qualification. A couple of my friends have done that. There is also educational psychology that you can do. You can go into that route and become an educational psychologist. These are all like associated professions. So a lot of social workers who have done this for a while do not aspire to become managers. They've had their fill of doing frontline work. They kind of foray into these kind of areas. What else? There might also be, you might want to work so you could work for fostering. So the foster carers also have social workers. So you can work in recruitment of foster carers and quality of foster carers in the country. The one place I haven't mentioned throughout, if people are thinking about a social work degree course, traditional universities is not the only route. So there is something called Frontline, which is a fast track program into social work, but they primarily do children's social work. They don't do adult social work. So that can be an option too. So if you look at our Frontline charity, you can find them online. They have a 2.5 year course, but their course is unique. It is primarily work based. So you only do placement and then you have some study days in summer. But you can work for them as well because they do various things in the education sector of social work. And then you can, of course, go into teaching social work.
Thank you so much, Kakoli, for explaining this in so much detail. Anyone who's wanting to pursue this, they would have a brief idea, at least where to, start looking. So thank you for that. Let's reflect back on your journey and see if we have missed certain things. If you had to go back and restart a career, would it be the same career?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And clearly so, because from whatever I've heard from your journey, it is very rewarding. What's one thing you wish someone would have told you when you were 20?
Be patient.
Did you learn it along the way?
Yes.
Okay. It's a very important part of your profession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And patience around everything, just not, your career. Patience in staying with uncertainty. Patience with a phone call that you are expecting but isn't coming. Patience with those.
What has been your biggest challenge throughout your career?
Ooh, I think possibly this will sound a bit weird, but actually it is. Sometimes we make decisions for children that changes the course of their lives, but sometimes those decisions in, say, a few years' time don't work out the way we had thought it was going to work out. I think my biggest challenge has been then not being able to support them because they are not in your jurisdiction or they're not, with your borough and they're not open to you. And I find it really hard to then go and advocate for them and get the agreement I need by saying, but we started the ball rolling. So we have a responsibility here. So I'm often disappointed when I try to get those decisions for children. I think that has been my biggest challenge. And I hope someday I kind of get a yes from somebody.
Maybe you can work on some policy changing for this.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. With the kind of exposure you have, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Because defining children in jurisdiction doesn't work.
Okay. Let's go for some lighter questions.
Yeah.
What's that one book that has influenced you the most?
One book that has influenced me the most. Ooh, there are quite a few actually. You're asking me to pick a hard one now.
Pick a couple of them if you like.
I think The God of Small Things.
Okay. By
Arundhati Roy.
And why is that?
I think it was the way it was written. I think you could smell the how should I say? You could smell. You could use all your senses when you read through that book.
Okay.
So I could smell the rain. I could feel the rain on me, and it just the language and the way she wrote it was. I think she was probably the first woman author that I felt had touched my heart to a great extent. Kiran Desai came after that because the Lost Inheritance was another book that I really, really loved. I think Arundhati Roy. I have the new book of hers, the autobiography book.
Yeah, I've heard about it. I haven't read it yet. Yeah, wonderful.
People are asking me not to read it, but
Okay. One thing that every student or professional should know before getting into this career.
It's hard and it doesn't get easy.
Your career in one word.
Devotion.
That's a very beautiful answer. One moment in your career that you will never forget.
Ooh, my leadership award.
Yes, I remember that. So, what is this award about? Can you explain us? I'm sure it was a thrilling moment.
So it was the Frontline, the charity I was talking to you about that does the social work course. They have their social work awards, and that's a national award. So it's for everybody in the profession nationally in the UK. And I won the award in the leadership category. And there was, I think, there's quite a few people. The reason I was nominated was for my inclusive practice and my attention to diversity and inclusivity not only with the staff, but also helping staff to provide culturally competent service to the families, embedding systemic practice in the front door. So the best thing about my award was that most of the awards were given out by sponsors of those awards. My award was given out by somebody called Fatma Whitbread, who was a child in care and was an Olympian. She was an Olympic medalist, I think, in javelin throwing for the UK, and she now has a charity for children in care. So I thought to myself, I did not know who she was before I went and took the award. I later found out who she was. And I thought how befitting it is to get an award from somebody who's such a stalwart in the profession, in the sector. So yeah, that was I had to, I was 6 other nominees in that category. And I came out on top.
Congratulations for that again.
Yeah.
What's the most misunderstood thing about your profession?
Social workers only remove children.
And what would you clarify it with?
Social workers only help children.
Brilliant. Advice to anyone considering this career?
Come if you're going to go all in.
Well, we haven't spoken about how IT is integrated in your profession. That's one. And hence, my reason for asking this is how AI in future, let me put it this way. How do you see AI getting integrated into your job?
Well, AI is already made inroads into my job. I don't know if you know Magic Notes. So they are primarily for social workers to help them with their recording. So that there is already something out there, but it's Westminster. Wow. Even the most resourceful of boroughs, it's quite expensive. Getting a subscription is probably not as easy, especially in this current financial climate. So something like Magic Notes, which takes your draft or takes a recording of your meeting and produces really thoughtful, helps you to produce really thoughtful assessments that you can then tweak and individualize and make it personal. Really, really, it helps you in getting ahead of those time skills that I was talking about. It is so important to help. I think we need to embrace AI. We need to kind of think about how we bring AI with us to help us to do our work. There's one single most criticism about my profession is that social workers' times are taken away with the admin work and not much time is spent with children. And I think AI can help us to get more time with children. There's a lot of admin work that is needed. And actually, if somebody just took the burden of or made that burden of the admin work slightly easier, then it would become so much more helpful for social workers to also have like a work-life balance more than they do now at the moment because of the admin work.
Right. Now I get that. You touched upon a point that boroughs may or may not have the budget to incorporate certain things. How does your whole profession, and especially when you're working in the capacity of borough, I want to phrase it better, how does the money aspect make you or break your ideas to be implemented? Make or break, enable you or disable you, basically, to make the right decisions? Or
no, I don't. So I think despite the financial constraints, I think we are legally bound to offer the rightful resource and the rightful service. Now, what it means is it's a little bit more groundwork at our end than what we probably have time for. So, for example, we just a placement closing down means that if the child needs another placement, you have to look for another placement, right? But if you're looking for another placement and somebody gives you an option that costs 4 times the current placement, you cannot settle on it till you have done your due diligence that there is nothing else that's reasonably more value for money than this is, because you have to think of all the other children that needs your support and services and resources from you. I think the challenge more in this is each local authority has been given less and less by the central government in way of funding for the job that they are expected to do. And more, they are having to make savings elsewhere to deliver the service that they know they cannot get away with. So if I have 100 children that I need to offer service and I need £100,000 for that, I have to bring that £100,000 from somewhere if my rest of my funding has gone down, right? So I'm to cut somewhere. I have to cut things to kind of make 100,000 to give that thing to provide the service. So I think the challenge is unless there is a little bit more coming together from the central and the local governments in terms of finances and budgets, I think local authorities will always be in the red when it comes to their budgets for children's services.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Honestly, this was a very, very enriching conversation for me, Kakoli. I have thoroughly enjoyed having you, and I really learned a lot from you, even in these 2 hours of conversation. So kudos to you for
Thank
what
you.
you do. Thank you once again to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I'm sure somebody, if they're thinking of this profession, will find some inspiration from this.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we close this episode, what stands out about Kakoli's social work journey is not just the title she holds, but the responsibility she carries every single day. She leads teams, oversees safeguarding decisions, works alongside courts, and ensures services reach vulnerable children fairly and equitably. At the heart of it all is one clear priority: the children's safety and well being. This was a powerful episode, not only because Kakuli holds a powerful position or has power to change children's lives, but because of the power she draws from within to function in the emotionally demanding world of child safeguarding. The resilience, the neutrality, the empathy without bias. It is no small feat. For that, kudos to Kakuli. Social work may not be the most financially lucrative career, but its impact runs deep. If this conversation has given you clarity about this aspect of social work and what it truly involves, do share it with someone considering this path. Because careers like this are built not just on qualifications, but on purpose. And if even one person finds clarity through this story, then it's worth it.